Headphones on, the whispers begin.
Have you ever seen a vampire? I am not referring to the mythical being known as Dracula. What I'm talking to you about is an animal so fearsome that just by seeing it, your blood freezes. In the small village of San Miguel, nestled in the rugged hills of rural Mexico, life followed a predictable and serene pattern. The villagers were primarily farmers who took pride in their fertile lands and the livestock they raised. The community was tight-knit, and everyone knew each other by name. It was a place where trust and camaraderie flourished, where doors remained unlocked and children played freely in the open fields. But that peace was shattered one hot summer night. The first sign of trouble came when Juan Delgado, a middle-aged farmer with a thick mustache and a heart full of laughter, discovered something gruesome in his fields. His favorite goat, Blanca, lay dead with puncture marks on her neck and her body drained of blood. It was an eerie and inexplicable sight that sent chills down Juan's spine. The villagers gathered around, whispering tales of old legends and dark creatures that roamed the night. El Chupacabra, someone muttered, and the name spread like wildfire. El Chupacabra, the blood-sucking beast of folklore, was not something the villagers of San Miguel had ever believed in seriously. It was a tale to scare children, a myth whispered around campfires. But as more livestock began to die in the same mysterious manner, fear took hold of the community. The puncture marks, the drained blood, it was all too real. The local authorities were baffled. They sent veterinarians and biologists who could offer no concrete explanations. The deaths were attributed to wild animals, but the villagers knew better. Something sinister was at play. They could feel it in the air, in the way the night seemed darker and more oppressive than before. As the days turned into weeks, the situation grew more dire. One by one, the villagers found their livestock dead, each with the same telltale marks. The economic impact was devastating, but it was the growing sense of dread that truly gripped San Miguel. Fearful whispers of El Chupacabra filled the air, and the once vibrant village became a place of anxiety and suspicion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, Maria, the baker's daughter, went missing. She had been out gathering wildflowers, a daily routine she loved. When she didn't return home by nightfall, her parents raised the alarm. The entire village searched for her, their torches cutting through the darkness, but Maria was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance marked a turning point. Until then, it had only been animals. Now a human life was at stake. The villagers organized night watches, patrolling the perimeters of their fields and homes. They were armed with whatever weapons they could find, machetes, old rifles, even farm tools. Despite their vigilance, another farmer, Pedro, vanished without a trace a few nights later. His wife found his hat near the edge of the forest, trampled into the dirt, but no other sign of him. The tension in San Miguel was palpable. People barricaded their homes, children were kept indoors, and prayers were offered at the small church daily. The village priest, Father Hernandez, spoke of faith and resilience, urging the villagers to stay strong, but his words did little to dispel the fear that hung over San Miguel like a dark cloud. The village elders decided to seek help from outside. They sent word to the neighboring towns, describing their plight and requesting assistance. A week later, a group of experienced hunters arrived, led by a grizzled man named Alejandro. He had faced many predators in his time, from jaguars to wild boars, but he had never hunted anything like El Chupacabra. Alejandro and his team set up traps and laid bait around the village. They spent their nights in the fields, armed and ready, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. For several nights, nothing happened. The village held its breath, hoping that perhaps the worst was over. Then, one night, a scream shattered the silence. It came from the outskirts of the village, where the Ramos family lived. Alejandro and his team rushed to the scene, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found was horrifying. Mr. Ramos lay on the ground, lifeless, with the same puncture marks on his neck. His wife and children were huddled inside the house, terrified and inconsolable. Alejandro knew they were dealing with something beyond the ordinary. He spoke to the villagers, gathering every piece of information about the attacks. He learned that the attacks always happened on moonless nights, and that the creature seemed to target the most isolated homes first. With this knowledge, Alejandro devised a plan. He and his team would use one of the isolated homes as bait, hoping to lure El Chupacabra into a trap. The volunteers for this dangerous task were the Gomez family, who lived on the far edge of the village. They agreed, albeit with great trepidation, to stay in their home while Alejandro and his team hid nearby, ready to strike. The night was pitch black when the trap was set. Alejandro and his hunters lay in wait, their breaths shallow and hearts pounding. The hours dragged on, the silence oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl. Then, just as the night was at its darkest, they heard it. A low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. Alejandro signaled his team to stay alert. The growl grew louder, closer, until they could see a pair of glowing red eyes moving towards the Gomez house. El Chupacabra emerged from the shadows, a grotesque creature with matted fur, sharp claws, and those piercing red eyes. It moved with an eerie grace, its gaze fixed on the house. Alejandro held his breath, waiting for the right moment. As the creature approached the bait, a goat tied near the house, Alejandro and his team sprang into action. They fired their weapons, the loud cracks echoing through the night. The creature let out a deafening screech and bolted into the darkness, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The hunters pursued, their adrenaline driving them forward. They followed the blood trail through the dense forest, determined to put an end to the terror that had plagued San Miguel. The trail led them to a cave hidden deep in the hills, its entrance obscured by thick vines and underbrush. Alejandro and his team entered the cave cautiously, their flashlights casting long shadows on the damp walls. The air inside was cold and fetid, and the silence was absolute. They moved deeper into the cave, their weapons at the ready. In the depths of the cave, they found the creature's lair. Bones and carcasses littered the ground, the remains of livestock and, to their horror, human victims. Maria and Pedro's remains were among them, confirming the villagers' worst fears. The creature lay wounded in a corner, its eyes glowing with a mixture of pain and fury. Alejandro took aim, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. With a final shot, he ended the creature's life, its body collapsing in a heap. The hunters returned to San Miguel as heroes, but the victory was bittersweet. The village had lost many of its own, and the scars left by the creature's reign of terror would take time to heal. The villagers held a somber ceremony for the fallen, their hearts heavy with grief, but also with a sense of closure. As the months passed, San Miguel began to recover. The fields were tended once more, livestock was brought in from neighboring villages, and the laughter of children returned to the streets. The memory of El Chupacabra lingered, a dark chapter in the village's history, but it also brought the community closer together. Father Hernandez spoke of resilience and unity in his sermons, reminding the villagers that they had faced a great evil and survived. The legend of El Chupacabra became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. And in the quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees and the moon cast its silver light over the hills, the villagers of San Miguel would sometimes gather and tell the story of how they faced the terror of El Chupacabra and prevailed, their courage and unity shining through the darkness.